listener production.
Hi, Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. You might have heard of donating blood or plasma, but what about poo? And did you know that people's stool is being used to save lives?
But with FMT, what we've seen is that it's successful, and sometimes all you need is just one treatment. Yeah, it's amazing. And so to have something that is over 90% effective it's pretty spectacular.
That chat with one man whose life was saved thanks to someone else's poo, and an expert on all the ways your stool could help transform lives is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Tuesday, the 5th of August.
Hey Helen, and to you listening, pressure is mounting on the world's politicians to put an end to the war on Gaza after images and videos showing starvation and malnutrition captured the attention of the globe. Hundreds of thousands of Australians marched over the Sydney Harbour Bridge at the weekend, calling for a ceasefire and an end to the blocking of aid to civilians. Now, since the protest, PM Anthony Albanese has declined to say if Australia will sanction Israel and its ministers, but he has reiterated his support for recognising a Palestinian state, saying it's not a matter of if but when.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is also facing pressure from 600 former Israeli secretary officials who are urging the president to ensure the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also an accused war criminal, to end the war, as it's the only way to save hostages still being held by Hamas. In the open letter, the former officials, including previous heads of the military, say to Trump, "Your credibility with the vast majority of Israelis augments. Your ability to steer Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government in the right direction. End the war, return the hostages, stop the suffering." Now, Israel continues to deny starvation is happening in Gaza despite overwhelming evidence from various humanitarian organisations, and the UN-backed food security experts say Gaza is facing the worst-case scenario of famine.
Yeah, and our PM and Donald Trump are both among the leaders that have rejected those denials from Israel. Meanwhile, opposition leader Sussan Ley has recently joined them, admitting there is hunger and starvation in Gaza. That comes a week after saying she was distressed by the images and describing the situation as complex.
It needs to be addressed, and I'm pleased to see that the Israeli government is doing exactly that. But what also needs to happen is for Hamas, the terrorist group that is in control of the Gaza Strip, to surrender. Release the hostages and surrender.
Now, Benjamin Netanyahu says he will be holding a meeting later in the week to decide on the best path forward in Gaza, with expanded military operations on the table as ceasefire negotiations seem to have stalled, which Israel blames on Hamas.
Executive Sergeant with Erin Patterson in Gaza. The only outstanding item is that mobile phone that you've got there. So I'll seize that now from you.
That was part of newly released evidence from Erin Patterson's triple murder trial, which shows the moment police seized the convicted killer's phone back in 2023.
There's a provision in the warrant that requires you to assist us to get into these devices. Is there a PIN code on your phone?
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
It's either 1315 or 131528. Is it opening? Right. No one, so there you go. Your job's easy.
In the video, Erin can be seen sitting down with a police officer and handing over the device during their investigation into her for potentially poisoning 3 of her family members, accusations she was found guilty of last month. It's later realised that the phone Erin handed over to the officer was a dummy phone that had been reset on multiple occasions, not her normal device, with police arguing in the court this was part of Erin's attempt to cover up her crimes.
Yeah, and in a second piece of evidence that was released by the Supreme Court, CCTV footage from a regional Victorian dump 4 days after the fatal lunch shows Erin carrying a food dehydrator into a green shed where she then disposes of it, and that was later found to have had traces of death cap mushroom on it. Now, after being convicted of murdering Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson, Erin Patterson is set to be sentenced in coming months.
Thousands of murder, rape and assault cases will have to be re-examined after new mistakes by an Australian forensic testing lab have been laid bare. The issues have been highlighted in a third report into Queensland's embattled DNA lab, which has so far been front and centre of 2 inquiries, after its staff was found to be using flawed and high-risk methods to test DNA being used in criminal cases. The issues have led to enormous delays in tests being returned, meaning results for DNA in rape and murder cases in Queensland take over 400 days to come back, compared to just 5 to 10 days in other states and territories. So that's 30 times longer.
Yeah, that's a huge amount. Meanwhile, countless untested rape kits that should have also had their results returned within 5 days are taking over a year to come back as well. And according to News Corp, the forensic scientist Dr. Kirsty Wright, who first exposed this problem, says this will mean that killers and rapists are potentially walking our streets free right now instead of being charged and facing the justice system. Now, you would think that post 2 inquiries that these issues would be fixed after various recommendations were made. However, Dr. Wright says since then, the same issues have happened again, with staff incorrectly labelling some tests as not having enough DNA to test due to them setting the benchmark too high, basically, and therefore it means that a bunch of samples that should have been tested and might have returned results and evidence haven't been, and it's not yet known how many have been impacted.
1 in 10 Aussies are now considered millionaires, according to a new global report, with the 7-figure sum that was once only realised by celebs and company heads now becoming the norm due to the country's property market. The report by Swiss bank UBS shows Aussies own a collective $10.5 trillion worth of residential homes and land, with the biggest increase in, quote, wealth being experienced by middle Australia, or our middle income earners.
Yeah, and the report found of Australia's roughly 25 to 26 million people, around 1.9 million of us have properties that bring our net worth over $1 million. Also, just an asterisk here, they use US dollars, not AUD, in this report when stating millionaires. Now, that is expected to keep going up, potentially by as much as 20% over the next 3 years, with hundreds of thousands more Aussies buying homes and expected to join those ranks.
Globally, the countries leading the charge in terms of having the most people with 7-figure net worth are the US, which is way off the charts, 23.8 million people, followed by China with 6.3 million in that domain, then France, Japan, Germany, the UK, Canada, and then us Aussies.
Yeah, and look, if you're like me and we're thinking, well, I do not feel rich, the people around me don't seem particularly rich, and 1 in 10 Aussies don't seem like they are millionaires, I do think this is an interesting indicator of supposed wealth because, sure, I'm in the property market, and in recent years, I'll admit our property value has gone up being in Brisbane, but regardless, we're still bound by our mortgage payments and how much we can actually pay back. So even if we wanted to take out more against our equity from that extra value, we probably can't because it would increase our mortgage repayments and our pays haven't gone up, so we wouldn't be able to meet it. So nothing really changes for us unless we sell our house and then downgrade or move further out so that we can actually try and keep that extra money. But I don't know. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. But what do you guys listening think? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. We're going to chuck a question in our broadcast channel behind the briefing. Let us know there.
And the richest man in the world just got even richer. Tesla's CEO, Elon Musk, has been awarded $44 billion worth of shares in the company as part of a deal that's expected to keep him as CEO until at least 2030. The massive pay package comes just 6 months after a judge ruled against an even bigger previous pay deal worth Australian $86 billion after a lawsuit brought on by a Tesla stockholder.
Yeah, and you might be thinking, hang on, didn't Tesla's share plummet recently? And yes, you would be right. This year alone, The company's shares went down by 25%, partly due to Musk's affiliation with President Donald Trump and that whole saga. And Tesla's most recent quarterly profits also fell from 2.15 billion to 632 million AUD, which is huge. And that has prompted, probably very fairly, the reactions from some staff and shareholders going, WTF on this recent move. If we're doing that badly, why the heck is Elon getting this? And I mean, are we really surprised by this, Helen? Like, their reactions to this, given Elon is kind of the one that got them into this mess and now he's kind of being rewarded, it looks like?
Yeah, look, I would be concerned if I was a shareholder, but they have the opportunity to vent their frustrations in November, where an annual meeting has been held, and this is due to Texas law to make sure everything's all across board. But yeah, look, it's a lot of money involved, so I guess we'll just see what happens with Tesla next.
Yeah, I don't know if that meeting is going to do very much. I mean, there's protests around the globe outside Tesla offices, but anyway, it might be a very long meeting, that one. Now, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is my deep dive, looking into how people's poo, yes, poo, is saving lives across the country. Stick around for that chat up next. Imagine going for your morning visit to the loo, doing a number 2, and instead of flushing, you collect it, then donate it. And by the day's end, you find out your poo helped save a person's life. It sounds strange, but that's exactly what's happening right here, right now in Australia. People's poo donations are being used for fecal microbiota transplants, or FMTs, to help cure painful, sometimes deadly illnesses. Elizabeth Connolly works for Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, who offers FMTs nationwide. Liz, thanks very much for joining me on the briefing today. Can you start by telling me a bit about how FMTs actually work?
The truth is, we actually don't fully understand exactly how FMT works. So the idea behind FMT is, or the goal rather behind FMT, is to transfer the healthy gut microbiota from a donor, and that donor would have been already screened, so it's a healthy donor, and you transfer their gut microbiota into a patient.
And what kind of results have we seen from this?
It's been amazing. In Australia, FMT is registered for the treatment of CDI, which is a nasty bacterial infection. Its full name is Clostridioides difficile infection, which is a bit of a mouthful, so we say CDI or C. diff. And that's a really nasty bacterial infection where patients can have profuse diarrhea. You could be going to the bathroom up to 20 times a day, zero quality of life, and in some cases it can actually be fatal. And so FMT has been well established now in the treatment of C. diff, which is amazing. C. diff has historically can be quite difficult to treat with antibiotics. But with FMT, what we've seen is that it's successful in treating CDI in over 90% of cases. And sometimes all you need is just one treatment. Yeah, it's amazing. And so to have something that is over 90% effective it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, that's an incredible cure rate. And I actually got to speak to one of the people who's experienced this firsthand. This fellow's name is Kevin Young, and he was facing a pretty grim prognosis after developing C. diff following his surgery for bowel cancer. Now, Kevin says his doctor signed him up to take part in a pilot program that was trialling fecal microbiota transplants because things weren't looking very good and they'd run out of options.
It was pretty nasty. With C. diff, you can get a whole range of infections. So you can have a mild infection where you just have diarrhea all the way through to death. The C. diff produces a toxin that, if it's present in a high enough level, it shuts down your vital organs. And I think there's something like 20,000 people in the US die from C. diff. Mine was an extreme case, but they were toying with the idea if they couldn't get it under control with vancomycin, then they were going to remove my large intestine. Yeah, I had the treatment and the effect was immediate. The effect was incredible. It basically, there were good microbes in there. If the C. diff tried to come back, it had lots of competition. And it worked. It worked amazingly well. I didn't know at the time that could actually have killed me, but so mine was the perfect storm, and one of the worst cases. Not the worst case because I'm still alive.
Now, just like Kevin, there's been a whole range of Aussies that have reported life-changing results after having a fecal microbiota transplant, which is now not only being used to treat C. diff, but other health issues too. And while FMTs haven't been TGA approved for other uses yet, there are trials underway looking at what else it might be able to treat. Liz, I understand Lifeblood's involved in a few of these as well. What can you tell me about them?
It's important, I think, to point out that FMT is actually TGA approved for the treatment of C. diff. So it is highly regulated now, and it is registered on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods for the treatment of C. diff. But you're right, for anything else, it's not yet approved. And so this is why the research is so important. And so Lifeblood is currently involved in a number of different approved clinical trials and investigating FMT for the treatment of things like graft versus host disease in stem cell transplant patients, immune checkpoint inhibitor colitis, long COVID, and also for the restoration of gut microbiota in patients, ICU patients with persistent critical illness. So there's a huge range of things that FMT is currently being used for. And it's great to see this research happening because the potential of this treatment for a whole range of conditions is very exciting.
Yeah, and I think I'd read there'd been anecdotal stories from people who've even tried FMT for mental health issues. I read one woman relating to her depression. There was another woman who tried it for her bipolar and had said that she hadn't had an episode in years, which is just incredible. Again, it's not TGA approved for that purpose yet, but just amazing to kind of see all the different areas that it might have a future in. What does all of this tell us about the microbiome, the brain, and the way, I guess, fecal transplants might be used in the future?
It's incredibly exciting, and I think this is why the research is just so important. It's only in the last few years, I think, that we've seen that our gut actually has a much greater impact on our overall health than any of us have ever thought before. And there's still so much that we don't know about it. So the potential for that is incredible. And so even with the long COVID study that Deakin and the Food and Mood Centre are doing at the moment, it's a feasibility study. So it's quite a small study to see if this could potentially be an option. But that will look at improving or potentially improving long COVID outcomes. And so patients who suffer from long COVID sometimes can have a lot of mental health issues as well. And so it's incredibly exciting that this is happening. But there's still so much that we don't know and still so much to learn. So it'll be interesting to see how this space evolves over the next few years.
And how huge of a discovery was this for the sector to find this treatment that has shown positive results for such a variety of illnesses?
There's evidence to show that it was done in China like hundreds of years ago. But certainly in more recent times, it has become quite an established treatment, particularly for C. diff and CDI. And it has been a game changer in that space. And so now it's registered even. I mean, a few years ago, FMT wasn't even registered in Australia and it wasn't regulated. And so you had clinicians who used to find their own donors, collect poo samples and poo donations from people and actually make it themselves in hospitals, which was just an incredibly poor use of a doctor's time. And so now that it's regulated, it's great that because it's incredibly important for the safety of the product and the safety of the patient. But it's amazing now that this is an established product and it's available for things like C. diff and for clinical trials into so many other research areas.
And you touched on it just then, but can you elaborate on why it is so important to kind of only really go down this regulated route and not to try do this at home, which some people have done? There's a lot of risks that would come with that type of treatment.
There's risks with any treatment, and no matter what it is, there's a risk associated with it. But the reality is that it can only be given to a registered medical health practitioner under the supervision of a gastroenterologist or an infectious disease physician. All of our donors go through an intense screening process, and that really is there to make sure that we keep those risks at bay and that we are issuing a safe product to our clinicians.
And is that because the risk, say, pre this being registered and that perhaps it could be a disease, or, you can transfer something from the donor to the recipient. And that's what this registering process does, is try to make sure it's the safest format that it can be done in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you take poo, for instance, from a donor who hasn't been screened or somebody who hasn't been screened, you don't actually know what's in there. And so it can be very, very dangerous. And so donors go through a screening process, and that's all overseen and highly regulated by the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
And for those people who might be listening going, yeah, okay, I've donated blood and plasma before, fecal donation seems pretty straightforward. Like, is it? And who's actually eligible to donate?
It is really straightforward, actually. It can be quite difficult to be eligible to donate, but I would encourage anybody who's living in Perth, because that's where our donor centre and our manufacturing facility is. If anybody is interested, please get in touch. But we're always looking for new donors. It's amazing to see that the impact they have on so many Australians. So if you are interested, head to our website and we'd love to hear from you.
And if you're still on the fence about lending a hand, or your poo, to help people like Kevin, he says if you're healthy, just pop down and donate to give others a chance at getting their health back too.
It's the sort of thing that you can do that would help a hell of a lot of people. If you have a good high fibre, healthy diet, and you're a generally healthy person, if you live on processed and highly processed food, don't bother. But if you have a good diet, and especially a high fibre diet and lots of natural foods, then yeah, please give it a go.
And you might even save a life like it did yours.
Absolutely. Or just making people's lives who have to deal with a horrible recurrent condition, it would make their lives so much better. So much better.
Kevin, really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me on The Briefing.
Absolute pleasure.
That was FMT recipient Kevin Young speaking with me there, and earlier, Australian Red Cross Lifeblood's Elizabeth Connolly. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.